Not working right. Hi everyone, I apologize for the delay. We had a little bit of an internet outage, but we're back up now and it should be working fine. If you have any issues or it's not coming through, please just put a question on your dashboard. And if you have any questions or comments throughout the webinar, please feel free to send us a message there and we should get that. So we'll get started and dive right in. We have a lot to go over today. For those of you joining us, we will be recording this and posting it on YouTube. So if you have questions or want to repeat, it will be there. My name is Anissa Ryland, and I'm the director here at the Johnson Center for Child Health and Development in Austin. So before we get started, I just want to invite you to follow us on our social media pages so you can stay up to date on events, new webinars, scholarship opportunities, and new research. You'll find us on Facebook and Twitter at JCCHD and on Instagram at the Johnson Center. I know many of you are going to want a certificate of attendance for this webinar. 1 hour after the webinar is completed, you'll receive an email. And in that email will be a link to take a short 3-question quiz, complete the quiz, and download the certificate of attendance. So let's get started. Today we're talking about social networking in adolescents, particularly those with autism-related developmental disorders. This topic has come up because over the last year, there have been several instances where we've been discussing the use of social networking teens here. As the mother of 3 kids, 2 young teenagers, and working with many adolescents here at the Johnson Center, we've seen how the landscape for communication and relationship building has shifted more to online platforms. So we do have a social skills program here at the center, and while the curriculums we use are current, we did realize we need to be continually updating them to account for the changes in how children and teens are communicating with one another. And that's really what this webinar was born. So today we're going to talk about what we mean by social media and social networking, and why we need to talk about it when it comes to our teenage children. What unique considerations are there, if any, for our kids and adolescents who have an autism diagnosis or related developmental disorder? So when we say applications, when we look at social media, we're looking at websites and applications that enable users to create and share content and participate in social networking. Social networking is the use of dedicated websites and applications to interact with other users or find people with similar interests to yourself. So I want to be clear here that I am in no way an expert on this subject, but as a mother and a professional who works with kids and teens, I am keenly interested in this topic. As I mentioned, in the past year, this has come up a lot, and in several situations that we push this interest along. So we've had teens and adolescents who face issues with social networking, some who thrive and greatly benefited from it, and I've seen teenagers confronted with some of the downsides of these forums. The first thing we did when we started talking about this was we convened a panel of experts. And really by that, I mean teenagers and college students who volunteered their time with us to answer questions and share their experiences so that we could better understand how we can help our kids be successful with modern communication. I apologize, I guess we were having a little bit of a sound issue, but I think it's been addressed. If you're still having an issue, please just let me know. So when we're talking about this, when we say applications, when I say sites, what are we talking about? What are the kids and young adults looking at and using these days? And there's a lot of things we know: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, Kik, LinkedIn, Pinterest, Fahodo, Musical.ly, Tumblr, Periscope, Reddit, Vine, WhatsApp, GroupMe, not to mention online forums, texting, email, etc. So there's a lot. There's a lot to look at, a lot to go through. So let's first just take a really deep breath. I've had to take several over the last several months as we've looked at this topic because it's a little overwhelming. And I think it's overwhelming for a reason. First of all, as parents, as professionals, we know the risks. First, we know that, and I want to be clear that these risks are not absolutes. They're not risks for everyone. Every teen, whether they have ASD or don't, is an individual and may or may not be susceptible to some of these. But it's good to be aware of these so that you can be on the lookout. So first is perseveration. Overuse of media is an issue for all teens. Teens with ASD may be more vulnerable to overusing social media sites, particularly as they get involved in those that speak to their particular interests. There are many ideas and ways to limit the chance of obsessive or overuse of technology, and we will talk about that in just a little while. Transitioning from online activities to in-person interactions may also be more of a challenge. Overuse of internet sites may limit face-to-face social interactions and reduce opportunities to practice or learn social skills or communication skills that we need. Another issue that I think most of us are aware of is that the internet can be a very dark place. With 1 or 2 clicks, anyone can pretty much access really unspeakable sites, violence, pornography, and more. This can be difficult for anyone to understand. I don't understand it, but it may be particularly confusing or concerning to a person with autism or a developmental disorder. It can also potentially inspire that person to copy what they've seen, especially if they don't know that the images are inappropriate or understand them, which could even lead to legal issues if they download illegal content or inappropriate content or act out based on what they've seen. This could be anywhere on the spectrum from violating terms of use of sites or lists to downloading illegal content or saying something that is perceived as a threat or worse. And so it may be that there's breaking social constructs. Online predators, I think, is an issue that most of us are aware of. They prey on people who they think they can manipulate. Children and adolescents and teens are especially vulnerable, and especially those with ASD. They may be trying to steal personal information from that person. They may try to use that person for illegal activities. So it is something to be aware of. Bullying and cyberbullying is becoming a growing issue for everyone on the internet. It's in the news often. Some people are more apt to say inappropriate or threatening things hiding behind their keyboard or their anonymous usernames. People with autism might be more vulnerable because they may miss the subtle cues or warnings that are coming that they're being bullied. They may also lack the tools to advocate or stand up for themselves or ask for help. So cyberbullying can be daunting and a painful experience for anyone. It may often feel like the answer is don't use social media as a parent or a teacher. But when it's the tool that is most often being used to communicate, to build and strengthen friendships, and to convey important topics for ongoing communication, that isn't really realistic or helpful. So if the kids miss out on all the inside jokes, the information about what people are doing, then it's harder for them to be included or talk to peers, and may even make them more prone to bullying. So it's sort of counterintuitive. You have to deal with cyberbullying just like you deal with old-fashioned bullying, with open communication, support, education, and awareness. And clearly we could talk about that for an hour, but it is an issue, and it is something that we will probably likely do another webinar on, but I do need to mention that. It's also important to know that people with ASD may inadvertently engage in cyberbullying without being aware or knowing the consequences of their actions. It might have happened to them and they're copying it, or they feel that turnabout is fair play. So it is important to talk about this. In terms of social networking and internet sites, people feel empowered with the perceived anonymity of the internet, and they get involved in things or say things they wouldn't normally say because there's little accountability. They associate with groups or people they might not otherwise. So it's important that you just be aware that that's an issue. And then social media and communication can increase social anxiety, worrying about getting likes or being excluded from groups or group chats. Seeing the perfect, curated, sanitized version of other people's lives might increase anxiety for someone without support and communication to address the issue. So these are just some of the risks we see and identify in getting involved in social networking and social media. So given all of that, you might say, well, why should I be concerned about getting my teen or my students involved in social media? And that, is not an unreasonable question, particularly if you have a child or a teen with autism who might not be advocating or pushing to join, kind of why upset the apple cart. Well, there are several things on the pro list when it comes to social media use. At the top of that list has to be social connections and inclusion that comes with being digitally connected to your community. This might even be of particular help to some people with developmental disorders or autism, because some of those challenges with social communication, like face-to-face communication or eye contact or body language, are not issues when it comes to communicating on social media. Communication there is is visual, it can be literal, you can take more time to process it, it's always available, and like I said, it can be more literal. So posts and responses there could be thought out, discussed, sometimes edited, and you can reflect and learn from your past communications. So it could be of benefit. It's important to know that there is data that tells us about this shift in communication. The Pew Research Center conducted a survey in 2014 and 15, and one of the more interesting findings there, I thought, was that teens feel more connected to their friends when they communicate with them on social media. 69%, you can see there on that top bar, felt more connected to their feelings with their friends, and 83% felt more connected to their friends' lives. In practical terms, that really means they have more to talk to their friends about, more to relate to their peers with, and these things are things that will help our teens with ASD who are looking to make more meaningful relationships with their peers. So I think it's important to keep that in mind as a big plus in that pro column. That same survey told us what we already know. Teens are online, and they're online a lot. And keep in mind this data is almost 2 years old. So it's only increased since then, according to what we've seen. Social communication is taking place online at greater and greater frequency. 92% of teens are online every day, with most of those several times a day. So that's where they're talking. In contrast, according to the study from researchers at the University of Missouri and Washington University, 64% of teens with autism avoid social media, instead spending most of their free time doing things like watching television or playing video and computer games. These rates were much higher than among people with other types of disabilities. And the study also found that when teens with autism were using electronics, they were nearly 5 times more likely to be engaging in solitary activities instead of using social activities like email or texting or social media apps or sites. So really, they're missing out on gaining important insights about their peers and their communities and building some of those connections that might really help them. And we have to ask ourselves, what are the social implications of that choice? Children with teens and autism do often go through social skills classes. Like I said, we have them here. They're all over the country. They're in schools and classrooms. They're in private clinics. And so they're going through those. And I worry that those might have some incomplete or dated information. If our children want to be included in a more diverse environment, they need the current skills and tools to be supported and successful. And I learned this lesson, not specifically applicable to social media, but about being current in your programs. Probably almost 15 years ago, I had the chance to work with a really well-respected autism researcher from Emory, Dr. Gail McGee, and she came and did an observation of our programs at the time that we were running, and she made 2 comments that have stuck with me over the years. And these were preschoolers that she was observing, and she said one thing in passing to me, and it was, she said, you go to the park, you can often pick out who is the child with autism, because they often have on a really handsome polo shirt with a collar and matching shorts and nice shoes, and they look like they've just stepped out of a J. Crew catalog. And you look at the other kids, and they're wearing, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle t-shirts that are ripped, and mismatched socks and mismatched shorts, because those kids were advocating to wear that. They were actively telling their parents, no, I want to wear this. Whereas the kids with autism may not be actively advocating for themselves, so they're being dressed in what their parents want to put them in. And so she was saying, if you're going to send them to the playground and give them these skills and put them out there to try and play with, if this is what they want, they're trying to learn, you're doing them a disservice by making them stand out from the bat, right off the bat. Dress them the way their peers are dressed. You have to think about that. And then she pointed out, some of the programs from some of the kids that were coming from schools were being taught to initiate play with their peers by walking up and putting out their hand and saying, hi, I'm Charlie, what's your name? Well, that's not how kids were initiating play at that age. They were just walking up and starting to play alongside them and doing what they were doing and then starting up a conversation. They may never even get to their name, let alone shake hands, but that's how play was initiated. And I think about this because we're teaching adolescents how to form friendships, how to form meaningful relationships. We want to be sure we're doing it in a way that is meaningful and appropriate for their age. So if we're teaching them to go up to somebody and saying, hey, can I have your email? I'm going to email you so that we can go to the movies on Saturday. That's not how most kids are communicating now. Most of them will trade phone numbers or their social media name. And then they may go on that social media site and direct message them and say, hey, what's your phone number? And so I think it's important to understand how it works. Social media is a really important mechanism for interaction and conversation among America's teens, and it plays a critical role in connecting teens to new friends, allowing them to learn more about them and getting to know them better. So, and beyond making new friends, it's a major way that they interact with their existing friends. So it's a way to connect with peers or people with similar experiences or perspectives to provide support and a community. So the kids that we spoke to, I think I mentioned that, we gathered a bunch of teenagers as my experts, and they very kindly allowed us to pick their brains. And they said that when they meet a new friend, they first give them their Instagram name or their Snapchat code, which we'll talk about later. Then they might direct message them, like I said, via one of those apps and ask for a phone number. So we need to think about that when we're teaching social skills to our kids and teens with autism about how to initiate that communication. We want to do it in a way that will be appropriate with their peers. We also want to think about future employment skills. That's a big consideration. Social media and computer-based communication technologies are making it possible for people with autism to enter the workforce more productively, thank goodness. There was a great article in the MIT Sloan Management Review that summed all this up, talking about how several large tech companies are intentionally tapping into the autism market to access those valuable skills that are in demand. Software companies like, I think, SAP and Microsoft are now actively looking to hire people with autism. I read somewhere SAP wanted to have, I think it was 1% of their workforce be comprised of people with autism within the next few years. And the reporters in that Sloan Management Review talked about how recent gains in social media adoption are part of what makes this new perspective on autism and employment possible. Utilizing these computer-based communication helps alleviate some of the challenges that people with autism might face in the workforce and allows them to bring their skills and knowledge in a meaningful way. So it's something we want to think about teaching because it's going to have long-term ramifications both socially and for employment. So some things we want to think about are, at what age do people access social media sites and apps? Most sites, most apps will give you a minimum age user. I think Facebook's is 13. Some others are 13. So that's a good guide. Also talk to peers. Who's using what? And obviously there's going to be a range, but that's a place to start. What sites and apps are appropriate? You're not going to have a 12-year-old on a dating site like Tinder. You want sites that are appropriate for their age and ability. You want to know what sites and apps are used by their peers. One thing I did learn in talking to our teens and college students are some of these are school dependent. Different communities use different applications and sites differently and in different frequencies. So kind of see if you can figure out in your community what are the sites that are most frequently used. What rules fit your family values? This is an important one. You're going to parent your kids through social media use just like you would use them through, parent them through any other community or any other issue or challenge. So you want to incorporate and think about your family values when you're making decisions. And what are your child's interests? Some of these forums, some of these sites are going to be more specific for people with certain interests. So you want to take that into consideration when you're looking into those. So we talked about all those risks. They're scary, they're overwhelming, we know them, and they make us all want to hide under a rock, but we're not going to because we know that there are solutions. I don't have all of the solutions. Like I said, I'm not an expert. This all came from people who are far wiser than I am. And I would love it if you, as we go through this, if you know of sites, if you know of solutions, if you have tips or tricks you could share with us. As I mentioned at the top of the webinar, we are going to have a follow-up webinar where we're going to talk about more specific curriculum and tools. And so if I can't get to sharing what you share with me today, I will definitely share it there. So please feel free over there on your little panel to share with us ideas, information, or suggestions you might have in this category, or any of them really. So the first solution is to educate yourself. Know what you're giving your kids access to. And I know it's a lot and it's ever changing, but know what types of media they can access. Whether you're giving them an iPad, an iPod, a smartphone, a laptop, a desktop, a Kindle, or even gaming systems now come with internet use, kids are going to have access, and many of them are going to have apps on them. So know what apps they're downloading, what websites they're visiting, pay attention to those age restrictions on those sites, and whether it's through parental control software, which we'll talk about in a minute, or checking the history on your children's device, which we'll also talk about, whether it's just talking to your kids or all of the above, stay involved and stay informed. It's really important not to bury your head in the sand on this. You also want to educate your children. Talk to your kids about what's appropriate and what is safe. Teach them that posts online will last forever. And I was really glad to hear the teenagers we talked to say they knew that. Don't adopt a don't ask, don't tell attitude. Just like we teach our children manners at the table, we try to teach them manners when they get gifts. We need to teach them manners about online behavior. The anonymity of the internet combined with teens' impulsivity can lead them to do things that they might not otherwise do. So you want to talk to them and talk to them often about what's appropriate, what is safe, and the consequences of some of those bad choices they might make online. It's also really important to set and communicate clear expectations. Consider writing a contract or a set of rules. When my children got smartphones as teenagers, we had a 32-point contract that everybody signed that went through all the rules, the expectations, and the consequences of violating those rules or expectations, so they knew what they were getting into. And I've only had to pull the contract out a couple of times, but it was really important to be clear up front. That way you're not being reactive or punishing. They know what the expectations are. Think about, do they need to earn or pay for access to phones or computers? What are the limits? When can the computer or phone be used? Where can it be used? For how long? Make sure everyone knows up front. What access will you as a parent have? What expectation of privacy, if any, can they expect? What do you expect of them? Some questions you can ask yourself is, do you want them having access to this at night in their rooms when they should be sleeping? Should there be gadget-free time in your house? Should the phones have limits on texting or calls or limited data plans? Some carriers do have parental tools. I know Verizon does, that let you monitor those things. Just make sure everyone understands the terms and then consistently enforce those rules so that they understand what's expected of them. Utilize parental controls when necessary and decide what kind of access, you're going to have up front to your children's phone or laptop. And again, you need to communicate all of this up front and in a clear manner. Lots of people require their children to give them their passwords and give them access to their digital devices. This doesn't mean you have to stalk them, but when kids know there's accountability, it might help them make better choices, and it will allow you to stay better informed. There are many ways to use parental controls on social media. You can download apps that can limit and monitor use. Just check the App Store, there are reviews online. Consider using a Wi-Fi router that will allow you to turn off access at certain times. There are routers that allow you to manage all kinds of internet access for all your devices in your home. I've found several reviews online for those. So just think about ways that you can and want to have access and control. Another way that you can encourage safety and monitor use is to encourage use in communal rooms. It's not a bad idea to have the bedrooms in your home be an electronic-free zone, just from a sleep hygiene perspective, a good sleep perspective, and it also makes sure there's a little bit of accountability and oversight when using online content. And honestly, one of the most simple ways to keep your child safe, any child, is to talk to them. We have kids who are nonverbal that we serve here, who are in all kinds of online social media platforms, and their parents talk to them about all of the things we've talked about and we will talk about, and they hear it. It makes a difference. So talk to them often. Talk about manners, dangers, consequences, what's right, what's wrong, what your concerns are, because that's how they're going to learn and grow as media consumers. A blogger who I follow had a post, actually she reshared last night, so I inserted this at the last minute just because I thought it was appropriate. Her children are younger teens, and she does require open access on their digital devices. She described a scene recently when she was going through her son's phone, looking at his social media accounts with him, and her son asked her when he might get some privacy on his phone. And her explanation to him was that requesting privacy on the internet is like requesting privacy in the middle of a baseball stadium during the World Series. Both the stadium and the internet are public places. If you say things in either place, people are free to hear what you said because it's public. She further explained this was doubly true for her because A, she's a person, so she can hear, and B, she likely paid for his ticket both to the internet and to the baseball game. She went on to validate his need for privacy. She said examples of private spaces are bathrooms, your bedroom, or your brain. She suggested that if he needed privacy for his thoughts, then maybe he should keep them in his head or write them in a diary that's in his room, clarifying for him that a diary in your room is private, but the internet is public. Her son did come back and counter with her that he could make his account private, But she replied that when you create an internet account that other people visit, even if it's private, you can imagine that your account is like a room into which you're inviting people. It's like you're hosting a party. And since he's still a teenager, there's no such thing as your own private party. As a minor, any party that he hosts is really hosted by his parents. What happens at the party was her responsibility, and making sure the party was safe for all of the guests was also her responsibility. She did acknowledge that part of his job as a teen is to push for more independence, so she welcomed the request, but she pointed out she was doing her job by helping him, protecting him, and teaching him. So we may not all agree with that approach, we may not all take the same approach, but I do think there's something to be learned there by the open communication and the clear expectations in that story. And I think especially with our kids on the spectrum, providing examples like that that they can relate to might help them understand better what it means when you say the internet is a public place, or something you say on the internet is accessible to all. Providing examples like that can make it a little more real. So what are some of the tools that you can use to help? Well, first, you can look at visual supports. Provide reminders of images of safety tips, whether that's a picture schedule or a list. A checklist of do's or don'ts helps. Maybe you could sit down and make a list of appropriate websites or reminders that they should check with a trusted adult. Again, when my kids first got their phone, there was a way on the browser on the phone that you could limit the sites that the browser would go to. So we started off with 20 sites that we knew were safe, that we knew they needed to go to, whether for school or ESPN videos for my son who loves sports or whatever that is. And then just said, if there's sites you want to add to this, that's great. We're happy to. Just come and ask and we can add it. And so that way we knew what they were looking at as kind of a transition into more freedom on that device. Well, and that will come with one caveat that I want to say. You should know that YouTube, as much as I know they try to restrict content there and limit it and get rid of inappropriate content, there is a lot of inappropriate content on YouTube, even with parental controls set. So just be aware of that. Volunteering up at the high school, I've just learned that and seen some things that I can't unsee. So just be aware. But if you start off with safe sites and add sites as they want to see them, then you know what they're looking at as safe. And then as that list expands, you can get to a point where you can open that access. But it might be a good way to start. Lists are great. Another thing is role-playing. Role-play scenarios with your child. Contrive situations they might encounter and discuss. Why are they safe or not? Some of the ideas might come from things you see on the news. Oftentimes this is in the news. So you might take a look, whether it's about cyberbullying, whether it's about internet predators, whether it's about someone's feelings getting hurt because you've said something they've misunderstood, whatever that is, kind of walk through the scenario so they can understand in practical terms what it means when you talk to them about these things. You can use social stories or scripts. These can be another tool to reinforce ways to stay safe on the internet. In a little while we'll have some resources we can share where you can find some examples of those. Discussion of content is a really, again, we go back to talk about what bullying looks like so the person recognizes when it's happening. Excuse me. They may be aware, at school that name calling is bullying, but talk about, if someone sends you a threatening message or a picture that makes you uncomfortable, or asks you to do something that makes you uncomfortable, or to send a picture doing something that you think might be wrong. Those are things you need to talk about because those are things that happen. You also want to talk about laws. It's important to talk about why there's certain things you can't download, or why terms of use says you can't say certain things. Just like you would teach someone going through TSA not to make jokes about bombs, we want to teach kids, in this platform, people can't see humor, the subtleties of humor. They may not be able to understand your teasing. So when you post something that could be perceived as a threat, you need to think about that. That could get you into trouble. So talking about those things is one way to address it. Talking about the laws. Again, supervision, knowing what's happening, knowing what they're doing and talking about it, kind of goes back up, is a way really to help them learn how to do this effectively. And one thing, you can also teach your kids, there are online tools for them, how to block people. That's a really great skill. If someone's bothering you, you can turn them off. And that's one of the wonderful things about the internet. how to report a threat. Don't just say, if something's threatening, report it. Walk through what that looks like. If you get something that makes you uncomfortable, save it, show it to me. We can talk about what we should do about it. Teach them to be media literate, to understand that not everything on the internet is true, and even seek out sites that you can show that. We had one young man here that we supported who it took some time to convince him that The Onion wasn't a real news site. And so we use that as an opportunity to find other examples to say there's lots of stuff online that isn't real. It's either a joke, it's made up, it's contrived, it's, whatever it is. But early on, teach them that. That's a really critical skill that I think lots and lots of people need to use. And then nanny locks and parental controls, which we can talk a little bit about in a minute. But I think the most important thing on this list is really encouraging your child, your students, to talk to you if there's something they don't understand. It makes me think of when I was younger, my mother had a story that she would use when we would have questions that might be a little deeper or a little heavier than we could handle. And she would say, do you remember when we went to Grandma's house and we had the really big suitcase? Could you carry that suitcase? And of course we would say, well, no, it weighed as much as I did. It was too heavy. And she'd say, that's right. It was too heavy, so I carried it for you. This question you're asking me is a lot like that suitcase. It's too heavy for you right now. You're going to grow and be able to carry it. But for now, you can carry the smaller bag. I'll carry that for you. And then as you grow, you'll be able to carry more. Your question is kind of like that. It's really a big, complicated answer that you can't carry yet. This is what you can carry. Here's the answer I can give you. As you get older, as you do more, as you get more involved, I'll give you more information until you have it all. And so I think telling our kids enough without overwhelming them and saying, that's why I'm here. My job is for you to come to me when something doesn't make sense, and I will help you make sense of it. So I think that's a really important conversation to have, particularly in context of some of these scarier risks to online involvement. So safety. One of the things you want to teach your kids is that online friends stay online unless they talk to you. This medium opens up a wonderful world where you can have friends all over the world and friends with similar interests and get involved in groups where people understand you and understand your interests. But that also leaves them a little open to online predators and being taken advantage of. So one protection is to say your online friends stay online. Unless, if someone says they want to meet, great. You come to me, we'll talk about it and see. But the rule is that the online friends stay online. That's one way to protect them. Manners matter. Teach them that. The best rule, don't say anything online you wouldn't say to a person's face or that you wouldn't want your grandma to hear, is a good rule of thumb. And I think it's one that bears repeating often. Be aware of attachments. It's something, we have to practically teach everyone who's going to be online. If you get something from an unknown source, don't open it. We can talk, bring it to me. We'll talk about it. If you see something suspicious, talk to me. In terms of personal information, it's important to teach them about that. Probably the first step would be to teach them what personal information is. And I think a lot of teens don't know this, regardless of whether or not they have a developmental disorder or not. It's really important to develop a checklist of information that they need to know, and then just talk about what is private, what is not private. You can turn it into a game. What's your birthday? What's your social security number if they need to know that? Where do you live? What school do you go to? What's your phone number? When's your mom home? All of those private questions, teach them those and then say, is this information private? Is this? Make sure they can discriminate if they're able, and then teach them that that's just not information we share online. Another tip is that the kids gave us when we were talking to our focus groups is to be aware that a lot of apps and sites do have location tags that come with them that you have to turn off often, so they're defaulted on. That, for example, when you post a picture, it tags where that picture was taken, and that's information that can tell people where you are at any given time or where you live. And so for privacy reasons, you want to make sure those location tags are turned off if you're concerned about that. Learning to trust your feelings, to trust your gut, to talk to an adult are all important things when you're getting involved in these groups. And then, of course, being a savvy consumer, understanding what is and isn't real, or that just knowing it isn't all real and might need to be taken with a grain of salt, and to check with a trusted person or source. And then a practical tip is learning not to spend money online without permission, or then as they get older, teaching them the tools to understand how you can, which I'm still figuring out myself, but looking at, making sure there's a safety lock, making sure it's a trusted site, what information are you giving out, is it better to use a site like PayPal, things like that. So we talked a little bit about parental controls, and there are lots of software options out there. And you can find PC Magazine, Consumer Reports, all have different reviews that give you nice charts that tell you what they can and can't do, what their costs are, that kind of thing. Just know that these methods, pop-up blockers, software programs to block or monitor content, they're not foolproof. They're a great tool, but they're not a substitution for awareness or communication. So I'm going to take a quick minute for a couple of questions. I know that we're a little tight on time. But I just wanted to see if, so I'm getting some questions about particular, sites where to learn. And again, we're going to get into some of the resources a little bit later, and that we will have a second webinar that will go into specific curriculum and activities. So we'll get to those in just a minute. In terms of copies of the slides, as I mentioned at the beginning, this presentation will be posted on YouTube, hopefully within the next 48 hours, so you'll have access to it there, and we'll be able to see the content there. Let's see, how do I know what sites or apps are appropriate for my teen? Honestly, it depends on the kid. We're going to go through an overview here in just a minute of some of the more common ones, but I think a good place to start is to make a list of what your concerns are. Make a list of skill building. If there are things that your teen needs to know before using a site, for example, being able to identify private information, or how to make a casual observation, how to use a computer, whatever that is, you can start to teach those skills in preparation of getting involved in some of those sites. So it really depends on the child's current skill level and interest, and then teaching them the skills to be successful on the sites that you identify. Let's see, what do I do if I can't stop my child from overusing or obsessing about a site? Well, there are levels and degrees. I think beginning with setting those limits that are clearly articulated, so that everyone understands when you can use it, how you can use it, what the limits are. If it becomes a bigger issue, and making sure if it's constant perseveration, access can be limited by not following those rules, so that might help it. Just be sure that you have access to other stimulating activities when you don't have access to it. Otherwise, that's all they're going to be thinking about. But if it's, no, we can't do that right now, but let's go do this other preferred activity, that's enough. That might teach them, there's other things to do that can be fun. Setting a timer is a great trick when you start, particularly starting out, to say, you have 20 minutes when the timer goes off. Although I will say, one thing I learned from a psychologist friend is timers are great, but when it goes off, if your child is right in the middle of a game or a thought or a sentence or something, try if you can to let them complete that thought, sentence section of the game. As I think about how frustrating it would be for me if somebody just walked in and closed my computer and I was midway through doing something. So, they're people, they deserve respect. So set the time. When the timer goes off, you have to finish what you're doing. You have 30 seconds if you're in the middle of something or whatever that is, wrap it up, then take it away. That's a great trick. So I think, but there are times, clearly, you can, if you look online, you'll see that obsession and overuse of media for all teens is an issue. And if it becomes so overwhelming, you need to seek help from a professional. And there are people out there who can help with that. So we're going to move on real quickly. I will save some of these questions here for a little bit later. But we started off quickly looking at some of those most commonly used apps and sites that our focus groups had identified. I do want to briefly go through these so you can see how they're used and what you need to think about. One encouraging thing to me we learned that was all of the teens that we talked to, they were keenly aware that colleges, potential employers, or internship sites will be likely to see what you post. So, excuse me, they were mindful to avoid anything that was rude, clearly illegal, or offensive. Many of them also told us that they avoid arguments online and kind of always check themselves before they post a comment. I think that's something a lot of adults could use. But, do talk about that. Like, if you're talking about something that might have heightened emotion in a forum or on a site, help them skill build how to do that, how to navigate those waters, because it's something that comes up for everyone. They did say that almost all the teens said that their parents did follow them on their social media pages, which I was glad to hear, and that often a lot of their parents' friends followed them as well. So that was interesting. They did say that they don't typically follow or allow teachers to follow them. The exception on that was Facebook, which we'll discuss in a minute, which I think is good. A lot of school districts do have rules about that now. And so I think that it was nice to see that there was a little more transparency than I think I expected going into this. Before we do proceed, though, I do want to talk for just a second about old school email and text. Emails have not changed much, and kids mainly use them for very practical, utilitarian reasons for communication. Although I will say the juniors and seniors and college students we talked to did say they were having to learn how to write more professional emails. So I hope you educators out there hear that. Most of them said they wanted more instruction, and actually just read an article in, I think it was the Wall Street Journal, from a professor saying that he wants people to teach college students how to write emails to their professors because they get these kind of shorthand, somewhat maybe even perceived disrespectful communications from students. They really need to learn kind of that how to write a formal letter, how to write an email. So that might be something to think about. In terms of texting, traditional texting, just texting on your phone, with teens is mainly used for practical purposes. Most of their conversation and entertainment texting happens on apps, not on texting. I haven't quite figured out why, but that was kind of a universal message they gave us. They did say, other than group texts, which again they mostly use apps, and we'll talk more about that in a minute, but that texting was really just communicating a need. Can you meet me at 5? I need to be picked up, that kind of thing. They did say that they don't use punctuation in text. I think these are important things that we need to be teaching our kids who may need a little more instruction on social media. Not using punctuation in your text. One girl said her dad sent her a text that said, I need you to be home at 5, period. And she flipped out. She thought her dad was mad. She was very upset. And when she got home, her dad was like, what? I was just telling you to be home at 5. But that period told her this is serious. This means something. And all the kids in the room agreed, oh yeah, the period, that's something. So no, punctuation takes on a whole new meaning in texting. And so that's important to keep in mind. She did say that they convey tone or try to convey tone with the use of emojis. If anyone doesn't know, emojis are those little faces that you can put in text that, smile, sad, cry, happy, mad, all that. Or with, using LOLs, ha-has, inside jokes, that kind of thing. But they did warn those can be overused. So a minimal sprinkling of emojis tends to convey your tone. The other thing they talked to me about was that understanding that when looking at these different apps and sites, think about your screen name. What do you want to use as your screen name on these sites? Many of the teens use their name, particularly on sites like Instagram and Snapchat, so that they can be found. Since that's how they're first communicating with people, they want someone to be able to search their name and find them. I did learn some people, particularly on Instagram and sometimes on Snapchat, have what they call spam accounts. So a second account that is not their name, where they only share that maybe with close friends or sometimes even strangers, and they either post just, goofy stuff there or stuff they would normally post to their page. I haven't yet seen that it's really for anything inappropriate. It's more of your brain dump versus your more curated page that is your own page. Some kids create a second account to highlight a particular skill or hobby. So if they're a great musician, an artist, something like that, they might create an account just for that, where they share their art or their music or whatever their talent or interest is. And that could be interesting with our kids with ASD, because that might not be something that people are aware they can do. And so if they get friends who can say, oh wow, I had no idea you were such a great artist, that might be another door that opens where they wouldn't normally be able to share that. The other general advice that they gave us, first of all, nobody makes phone calls anymore, so know that. They did say that selfies should be limited to direct messages on apps like Snapchat, and they're usually goofy and self-deprecating. They are not serious. Serious ones come across as self-absorbed, so you don't want a lot of those. It's important to know that you don't have to reply to posts or comments on every comment on every post. A like is almost always enough. They also cautioned us that by the time something has hit the mainstream, meaning their parents know about it, it's often over. So things like Throwback Thursday, if you don't know what that is on social media, people used to post, TBT in a picture from a long time ago, which might even be 2 weeks ago. So that's not really in anymore. So we kind of have to, as educators, swim upstream a little bit and fight time, because by the time we naturally hear about it, it's probably something that people are moving on from. And so that's where kind of convening your own panel of experts, if you know any teenagers or can get your hands on any teenagers that you can kind of poll and understand, particularly as educators, I think that that's how you can stay more current, particularly if they understand why you're doing it. The teens were all really willing and happy to talk to us once they knew why we were asking these questions. I also learned hashtags are over unless you're using them ironically. So let's look and see what is out there and what is being used. So Facebook, I think most of us know Facebook, mainly because the users there are skewing older now. It's a social networking site where you set up a page. There are groups, events. There is presence technology, which allows members to see who's online and chat. It does offer a range of privacy options, and it's good to know about those, particularly if your child's setting up an account. I will say that the kids we talked to said that the teens nowadays rarely post status updates on Facebook. They're not using Facebook to share what they're doing and that kind of thing. Their Facebook pages were used primarily to store and share albums of photos. So as opposed to some of the other sites that are single photos, Facebook you can upload, I went to Susie's party Saturday and here's 20 pictures and I'm going to call that album Susie's Party. So I can put all the pictures there and share those. That's mainly what they're using them for. They're also using it for school. More schools are using Facebook to communicate with their students, particularly if your student is involved in anything. I know at the high school level, if your student's in a play, if they're in the robotics club, if they're on the baseball team, if they're in Model UN or debate or newspaper or whatever the group they're in, they might likely have a Facebook group, which is how they communicate with all the students. And I had to actually let my daughter get a Facebook page earlier because a play she was in, that's the only way they were communicating. And so she wasn't getting any of the messages, but what they needed to be doing, because that was the outlet for communication. And so that is the exception in terms of following teachers or talking to teachers on social media. That was the one place most of the kids said was the only social media outlet that they really communicated with teachers was through Facebook for school. The other thing, they just said mainly it was to keep up with family members, their older family members, because that's the social media they were on. They did say, most of the kids said they really only checked their Facebook pages maybe once a day, maybe a couple of times a week, so it wasn't something that they were really involved in. So that's something to keep in mind when you're choosing social media. Twitter is also well known. It's a free social networking service. It's known for you can only post 140 characters. Or you can also post pictures and that kind of thing. Most of the high schoolers we talked to said they don't use Twitter much. They look at it, and they might read it for news or Google and come up with something. Some said they thought it might be bigger at other schools or in other parts of the country, but certainly around here it wasn't as big with the young adults. As we got into our interns in college, they might use it a little more, but not quite as much. Instagram, however, is a very popular social networking app that everyone was on that we talked to. It's made for sharing photos and videos from your phone. So you create an account and you can post a photo or a video and that shows up on your profile. Other people who follow you can see it. They can like it with a little heart or comment on it. You do need to learn how to set yours to private if you want the followers you approve to be the only ones who can see your posts. So you do want to make sure you understand how to set it private so that they have to accept followers, and that way it limits who can see what they're posting. The kids we talked to said that there is some social anxiety involved with Instagram in terms of seeing how many likes your picture will get. They told us that like-worthy, and I put that in quotes, photos are pictures that are good quality, they look fun, they're events they can relate to, and they show fun memories. They said they don't like it when people post too many selfies or post weird photos that are hard to understand. They said you should only tag people who are in the photo, and you need to show how to untag yourself in photos that you don't want to be tagged in. The girls we talked to said that they actually think about timing when they post their pics, because they know posting, say, Friday and Saturday night, people are busy, they're not going to see it, and it might get lost in their feed. So, they were coming up with all kind of, Sunday night after 9 is that kind of thing. So there's some social anxiety that goes with it. And they summed it up, I thought it was a good summary to say that they think of their Instagram page as the best presentation of you. You present your hobbies and the cool things you're into. The boys that we talked to did say, they're on it, they use it, they'll like photos. They rarely comment on photos. If they do, it's usually an inside joke. The girls said they comment, but they like to keep their comments positive. The girls also reported they often ask their friends what pictures they should share and what they should caption them. So even just the posting action itself is a social interaction. The boys said they usually only post pictures of sports, hobbies, or group photos, never pictures of just them. If they have a girlfriend, they might post pictures of her or the two of them, but not very often. And so this is also the platform where kids often have those spam accounts we discussed. And I talked to a mom last weekend who said she has a son who is on the spectrum, and he had a habit of posting inappropriate comments, nothing illegal, nothing inflammatory, but just things that may not make sense or be taken out of context. And she actually created a spam account for him with a username no one would ever find, so that he could do that without it being something that would have social repercussions for him. I haven't thought through that, but it was something that she asked that I pass on. So I am. Instagram was one of the ones that the kids said they check many, many times a day. The next one is Snapchat. A fun fact that not many people know is Snapchat's logo is named Ghostface Chilla, based on Ghostface Killah of the Wu-Tang Clan. Little pop culture reference there for you. In 2014, almost 50% of the class reported using Snapchat multiple times a day, and it has only increased since then. Snapchat is a mobile messaging app that's used to share photos, videos, texts, drawing. It's free to download, free to send messages. It's very, very popular. One thing that makes it a little bit different than texting or photo sharing is that the messages you send disappear from the recipient's phone after a few seconds. Though one thing we do warn kids about is they can take a screenshot of the picture. So it used to be people really felt safe sending anything because nobody would see it, and then people would take screenshots of that photo, and there would be repercussions to that. So, I'm sorry. It's raining a lot here in Austin, and my allergies are driving me crazy. Anyway, now Snapchat does have a feature that it notifies you if someone's taken a screenshot of one of your pictures, so there's a little more accountability, but hopefully that pierces that bubble that kids had, that because it disappears, it doesn't matter. It's really simple to use Snapchat. You just, you take a picture, you pick who you want to get it, you send it, or you can post it to something called My Story, which is basically a page that stores your pictures for 24 hours. So you can post it, it'll stay there for 24 hours for your followers to see, and then it's no longer there. Users add friends from their device or their contact list. And so in talking to the kids, and Snapchat was one that I will say the kids used a lot. It's almost, it seemed like it had replaced texting. And they liked it because there was the visual component, and it has, cool filters. So you can see here, like, these are examples of some of the Snapchat filters. You take a picture of yourself, and you can add these filters that add things. You can draw on it, you can add text, and so the kids really like that. So you can send these via that private message. You can post it to your story, or there are even public stories that you can post it to. So for example, we're here close to the University of Texas. There might be a University of Texas story that day, and if I take a picture and I'm on campus or near campus, I can post that to the University of Texas story, and everybody who looks at that story can see it. So in terms of the kids that we talked to, they said that really Snapchat, they use it mostly with their close friends. They tend to ignore requests or block requests from people they don't know. That's mainly because they're more free with what they post. So it does kind of tend to be something that they're a little more open, and it's less curated. It's not the perfect photo of me. It might be the photo of me looking goofy. And and so it is a little more casual. There is a kids version for younger kids under 13 called Snap Kids, and you could use this as an intro. It allows you to take the pictures, use the filter, draw on it. It just doesn't have the social component where you share it or post it. So it might be a good intro in terms of using the technology without the social communication part. Though I will say for teenagers, it really is a big component of communication for the teens. So the next thing we talked about with the kids was Kik. At first glance, Kik is just another free messaging app for your phone. It's you log in, you have a username, then you can send texts and selfies and emojis. And that's just the first level, though. So Kik is clearly recruiting and designing it for teens in mind, and so it has a built-in web browser and all sorts of internal apps and things like that, with the idea that once you're in there, you don't ever have to leave. There are apps you can. The most important thing for everyone to understand about Kik is that you can find and chat with total strangers in Kik. A couple of their top apps are actually, I think one's called Flirt that I read about, and one's called Match and Chat. So they're meant to match you with strangers to talk to and flirt. So clearly that kind of heightens the vigilance needed when you're on it. So, the ability to match people with strangers for conversations is nothing new. It's been around since AOL chat rooms. But you just want to know, the thing with Kik is it's anonymous. You don't have to link your account to a phone number, and you don't need to use your real name. So it really is, some people are concerned it's kind of a right playground for predators or people with ill intentions. So just be aware of that. LinkedIn I've included because it's a social media site. Most kids aren't using it, although high school juniors and seniors are often being encouraged to use it as part of their college application process. So it's a good idea here to teach older teens and young adults to discriminate between content that would be appropriate for a business site and content that's appropriate for our personal site. So as our teens get older, we want to be sure we're teaching that so they're posting things in the right place. Pinterest, I think most people are aware of. It's a social network that allows users to visually share and discover new interests by posting or pinning images to their virtual bulletin board. I was not aware really how much it was being used as a social network, but it really is. Their goal is to connect everyone in the world through things they find interesting. And I was surprised how many teens are using it. It's primarily girls who were telling me that they were using it, and they use it to do things like pin college items, college things they like, colleges, dorm accessories, or clothes they like, and then they follow their friends to see what their friends are pinning and to comment on it. So that might be something that you're interested in. And then if you have special interests of art or crafts or things like that, you might be on there looking at those things and pinning it and sharing that with other people who share that interest. Fahoto is a relatively new app. It's very similar to Instagram, but it allows you to create and share moving pictures or GIFs or GIFs. I'm not getting into that debate. That you take on your phone. Other than how you take the photos, it's very, very similar to Instagram, but I am seeing more and more teens using it. Musical.ly is a popular app for making short, like 15-second music videos. So you select a snippet of a song, you record yourself singing it or lip-syncing to it or dancing. Some kids don't even use music and just do little skits. And then once they finish recording, they can add effects, and then they share it on the site as well as on other social networks. And then to grow their followers or fans, they can share the videos anywhere. And Musical.ly actually encourages the users to post things on Instagram and Facebook and all those other things, and they can save it and post it to online communities. So the goal is for many of those users to have a featured video. And so featured videos, that's like a big deal to be featured, and it appears on the featured feed, and then it gets you more followers. Now on Musical.ly, it's important to know that all the accounts are public by default. So that means when kids post a video, everyone can see it, and anyone can follow them. So in settings, kids can change their account to private, but you have to actively do that. And then with a private account, only approved followers can see what you've made. Tumblr, I think most people are aware of. It's a microblogging site. It's one of those popular blogging sites, not micro, but just blogging. It has hundreds of millions of blogs, I think, and it allows anyone 13 or older to create an account, similar to Facebook. It is harder to find people you know on Tumblr without knowing their usernames because most people don't use their name. And so you post text, photos, pictures, music, and kind of create a visual blog. Most people find blogs through keywords or interests. The only thing to be really aware on Tumblr is what I've seen. There is a lot of inappropriate content that is relatively easily found. We were poking around one day with a couple of other parents when we were doing this, and a teenager, and a couple of clicks and not actively seeking, came across some fairly inappropriate stuff. So just be aware of that, and be mindful that you want all your parent settings and supervision in place. Periscope is an app that lets you share live video streams from your phone or tablet. And so, some people do a Periscope from a concert or a sporting event, or, someplace where they can kind of capture the energy and the unfolding news story. It's been used to capture news when news is breaking. The immediacy of the app encourages people watching to comment while it's happening, and then the person sharing the video can respond in real time. The feature of that makes it more active viewing experience, but clearly also you then can't edit what you're saying, edit what you've posted, and it's live, so you just want to be mindful of that. Reddit is a social media and news aggregation and discussion site. The registered community members, which there are, I think last time I checked it was over 500 million, submit content like texts or links, and then registrars vote them up or down, and so then things appear as they're more voted on, and then there's discussion. And so the content are organized by subreddits, different subcategories like news, science, movies, food, current events, whatever it is, and then there's comments among it. But it is really popular, particularly as people get older, and people who are more prone to spend more time online generally can get in there and have more lengthy discussions. But I will say, again, it was one of the ones, the tone on it can get to be very argumentative. There's some great information there and some great people, but among talking to the kids we talked to and other people, they've said that's where they tend to see more arguments. So just be aware of that. Vine is another video sharing app. It is owned by Twitter, so it works well with that. It's meant so you can make short little films that are linked together for short videos, and then it's played in a loop and you post it. It's similar, it looks kind of similar to Instagram, and you have a feed of all your friends' Vines on the home screen, and then you can have your own page, which it takes most of your information from Twitter, and then you post videos on the page. And then there are these messaging apps. Like I said, kids don't generally communicate now on text necessarily. They're using texting apps. So things like WhatsApp or GroupMe are apps that they use. WhatsApp uses the internet to send messages or images or videos. It's similar to texting, but it uses the internet. So originally I think kids did it because it saved the cost of texting if they had limits on their texting plan, and now they just do. It also has features like group chats, location sharing, voice messages. Again, the same warnings with that location sharing things apply. GroupMe is similar. It's owned by Microsoft. Some of the features there are the ability to share pictures and videos, your location, create events, and personalized emojis. So this just might be a way that kids are texting. And then honestly, there's all kinds of things constantly coming up on the horizon. Peach, Wanello, Yik Yak, Shots, Bebo, who the heck knows? There's going to be something new all the time, and that's part of why it's good to have your ear to the ground, have a source you can talk to, understand what means people are using to communicate so that you can help prepare your child. I want to talk a little bit about online forums. So there are lots of online forums to get involved in based on your interests. Wrong Planet is one I just wanted to put here. That is a web community designed for people with autism or developmental disorders, for them and their parents and professionals. And they have discussion forums, they have news sections, they have blogging features, they have advice and suggestions and how-to guides. So if your adolescent or young adult is looking for a like-minded community who understands some of the challenges they're going through, that might be a good resource to look at and see. And connect with people there. There are other online forums that you can find. I didn't have a lot of time to go through them, but Yahoo groups, Google+, most autism society chapters have their own forums, and some of them have forums for people with autism. Autism Speaks has online forums. And then there are interest-specific groups that may not have anything to do with autism, but might speak to something they're interested in, whether they're into trains or coding or gardening or whatever their special interests are. I guarantee you can find an online forum where they can meet people who share those interests. So as I mentioned before, we're all going to take a really deep breath here. And then, as I said, we are going to have another webinar in the coming months with more activities and curriculum ideas to help students with ASD get involved and navigate these social media and content waters. In the meantime, you can do some more homework on your own. There are lots of sites to look to for information. I want to say that I haven't had a lot of time to vet these sites, so including them is not an endorsement, but check them out and decide if there's helpful information here for you. One I found was Safe Smart Social. They offer digital citizenship social media safety assemblies for high school, middle school teachers and parents, and they have some online information and webinars on their site. Autism Expressed is a company that teaches digital life skills to promote independence for students in a tech-driven society. It is fee-based, but it looks like on their site they do have a free trial, so that might be something you want to check out, particularly if your child needs to kind of start at the beginning and really understand everything about, what's a link, what's a website, what's a this. It looks like it has some good basic information building up to more complicated. KidsPrivacy.net reviews different sites and mediums and offers tips and advice for parental controls. And again, advice in terms of appropriateness and accessibility. That's all subjective, but you can gather facts there and then make your own decision. WebWise is out of Ireland, and it had some interesting resources on there for teachers, so you might want to check that out if you're trying to incorporate some of this in your classroom or with your students. And then Safe Surfing Kids. This is the one I mentioned earlier, has some examples of lesson plans as well as some social stories that you can use as a template to create your own. And then another one I found was Social Safety. I think this one might be a little dated, but it had some good information. I think it's dated only because they reference MySpace, and nobody's on MySpace anymore. Well, I shouldn't say nobody. I'm sure there are people on there, but none of the teenagers I talked to. Some laughed at me when I asked. But that's another site you might look to for resources. So I know we're running out of time, and we don't have a lot of questions. Some of you have sent in some suggestions. I know there are fake accounts on Instagram and like Instagram. One's called Finsta, it looks like. There's talking about the dangers of texting inappropriate pictures, and we referenced that a little bit. There's a lot of information. Even somebody asked about online pornography. Again, that's something we're going to cover all of that in our subsequent email because our staff's still gathering information and talking to experts about it, so we will share that information very soon. If you'll just follow or check in on our Facebook or Twitter pages, we'll post when that's scheduled once we get it done. I think your questions kind of speak to the fact that it's a complicated world out there, and it continues to grow and expand in ways that bring great new tools and great new opportunities, but also ways we need to be aware and vigilant in supporting our kids so that they have positive and productive experiences when using these tools. I do want to just thank many of the kids who talked to us and shared their information. They were wonderful and open and supportive and really taught us a lot. So we're grateful for their input and their influence on this, and we will continue to seek their input and influence as we develop curriculum and activities so that we know that what we're teaching our kids really is meaningful for them. That's the goal. I hope I haven't overwhelmed you too much today. I know it's been a lot of information. As I mentioned, this will be going up on YouTube within the next 48 hours. For those of you that do need certificates of attendance, within the next hour you'll get that email that will have the link to the short quiz that you take, and once you've completed that, you will get your certificate of attendance to download. If you have any other questions or resource suggestions or ideas or comments, please feel free to email us at info@johnson-center.org. We really welcome your input because, like I said, this is a community-wide effort to try and pull together resources and information to support our kids so that they can remain up to date and be included as communication and social activities shift more to being incorporated in the digital world. I thank you for your time, and I welcome your comments and questions, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Thanks so much.